So is that, Jim, tell me if you see a little square, red square,
Yeah.
that means it's taping, okay. Or that's a geriatric term, taping. Nobody tapes anything anymore. It's video recording. Hmm?
I knew what you did.
I know, I knew you would know. So welcome to you and welcome to those that are viewing this on video. In thinking about the topic for tonight, I always use things from previous meetings because we've done so many of them. And I found one that I wanted to do tonight. It's called Gifts of Imperfection. You've probably heard the Leonard Cohen quote. It says, "Forget your perfect offering. There's a crack in everything." And that's how the light gets in. And we know this, but for most of us, we want to do better than we want to get better. We want to improve. It's part of our culture. We're kind of in a self-improvement culture. And we do this even though we know that being perfect isn't possible. And it's so pervasive in our culture, it's almost a personality trait of our culture itself. We're trying to be good or great in everything. We'll watch a short video of Brene Brown. And in it, she says, she calls our striving to be perfect and to look good. She calls it a 20-ton shield that we carry around to protect us from being hurt. But what it actually does is keep us from being seen and from being genuine, because it's a protection. And as I was thinking about this, I was thinking about how I came to be the way I am. And I grew up in a Navy family, and we moved every year and a half. That was kind of a military culture. You keep families moving and to keep them flexible and everything. I don't know why, but that's what we always did. And by the time I was 11, we'd been in, I think, 7 or 8 different places. Every year and a half, we'd moved 3 or 4 places in California, then Virginia, then South Carolina, then Rhode Island, and back to another area of California. And I grew up constantly changing neighborhoods, different groups of kids, different friends, and every time I'd have to find a way to fit in with a new group of kids, many of which had known each other for years. And I remember when we moved to South Carolina, not only did I have to learn how to listen, I was failing spelling tests, not because I didn't know the words, but because I didn't understand what the teacher was saying. And I was, a week after we got there, one of the neighborhood kids says, "So I have a question for you." I was like 8. He says, or 9. She says, "Are you a rebel or are you a Yankee?" And that was a loaded question. So I went back and I had a feeling that I needed to know the right answer to that. So I said, "I have to ask my mom." So I went back. So what am I? Yes. She says, "You tell your friends," quotes, it's how air quotes for friends. "You tell your friends that you're not a rebel or a Yankee, that you were born in California, and long before the Civil War, there were no white people in California. Tell them you're an Indian." That was a great answer and a very clever answer, but I think I might have said I was a rebel just to fit in. I don't remember what I actually said. But I spent so much time trying to engineer how to be liked when in new environments, and I was always took the role in my family of being the one that was everything was all right, but almost from birth, I was kind of self-contained and not very outgoing. I was a pretty quiet kid, but I always admired people who were outgoing, and charismatic, and the life of the party and telling jokes. And I thought that would be neat. That's what I wanted to be, and that idea continued for really a lot of years. So many years that as I reached young adulthood, I had shelves full of self-help books, and I learned self-hypnosis, and I took all kinds of courses, and just trying to be something that I wasn't. And I took a public speaking course that I liked so much that I decided I wanted to teach it. It was the Dale Carnegie course, which really isn't a course in public speaking. It's always billed that way, but it's really a course in humanity. If you take the course, halfway through the course, the group falls in love with everybody else with itself. And I would always be asked how often that happens. Because it always happened. It's a 14-week class. It always happened about the 5th week. And they say, how often does it happen that this group, a group like this, gets together? And I would say 0 and 100. 0 that this group would happen. This is only going to happen once here. This group will never get together exactly like this again. But 100%, and if the group learns to share genuinely, then they do fall in love with each other. That's just what happens. So to teach the Dale Carnegie course, it's a 14-week course, a lot of material in it, a lot of presentation, a lot of group facilitation. Everybody in the course gives a 1 or 2 minute talk every single week. So there's a lot of intensity to it. And the training is pretty intensive itself. It's a 2-year training, and you apprentice with another instructor, and you do as a shadow for him, assisting him in 3 or 4 or 5 different 14-week classes, which I did with my mentor was a guy named Dave Gregory, and he was one of these guys who was outgoing and charismatic and life of the party, and you just wanted to be around him because it was so much fun to be with him. And so I decided that that's what I wanted to be. That's what this training was about, to be like Dave Gregory. And what Dave would do at the end of every 14-week class, he'd ask the students, he'd ask the students, he said, these people, there were usually 3 or 4 graduate assistants who were learning to be instructors, and say, they've been here working for you all this time. Now it's your chance to say something, to give them some feedback. And Dale Carnegie is always positive feedback. So every instructor to be received feedback from the group. One of these times was one of the last groups that I did with Dave. When it got to be my turn, the first person who spoke was a lady, and what she said was, here's what she said. I wrote it down. I can see how difficult this is for you, and I admire you for trying so hard. And I was devastated, because it was true. I was trying hard. I was trying very hard to be like Dave Gregory, but I didn't realize it wasn't working. That was failing so miserably, and I was actually depressed for a couple of weeks after that, and even thought about giving up this whole idea. Because I realized then, with all my efforting, that I was never going to be Dave Gregory. And so I gave up on that idea. And what happened in its place was my teaching was transformed. I was no longer trying to be like somebody else. The only other person I could be was myself. And what I discovered, that's just not my personality. I'm not one of these energetic, go get 'em, always with a joke and a ready line, life of the party. But my strength was, and it would come out in the classes, but I'd never really had noticed it really this way before, was in creating a safe space for people to share. And that's what Dale Carnegie was all about. It was people sharing from their heart, not from an agenda, not from from something that was pre-planned, but sharing something from their heart. And that really was what Dale Carnegie was about. I thought I wasn't going to share this, but I think I might. Dave Gregory, when Dale Carnegie, they tracked everything. They tracked how many people came to your class, how long they stayed in the class, when you started, when you stopped. Dave would watch the time when we were doing parts of the course, and he would say to us in a break, he'd say, so do you think you're ahead or behind in terms of the schedule? And you're always supposed to make the class seem organic and natural, but there was a schedule. We had to end by 10:30. And one of the things they tracked was the number of people who started, who ended. And if you got 100% of people that started the first week of the class and stayed 14 weeks, that was really good. And it was rare, it turned out, to have that, because it's so intense, because you're on the spot every week for 14 weeks. In my first 3 classes, I got all 3 classes were 100%. And Dave, my my mentor said, well, how did you do that? Did you pay them? Because he, yeah, brought ice cream. Because he'd had a few, but not like that. So that was, that really was such a valuable lesson for me to discover I don't have to be something different than I already am, as much as I tried to be. It was literally a goal of mine. I had an image of, before Dave Gregory, it was Scott Swanton. I said, that's who I want to be. And when I get really good at this, I will be like that. And I realized that's not who I am at all. You know? So there's a title of one of Brene Brown's books, is I Thought It Was Just Me. That's the title of her book. And you probably had those times where you're in a group and without maybe even knowing you were going to do this, you shared something that was very personal, and you might have even thought about whether you should share it or not because it was so personal. But when you did, people warmed up to you. You know, they had a new kind of respect for you because you could share that. And when other people did that, you'd see that as well. But it was a very, it's a hard thing to do. With Dale, Carl Rogers had a saying that which is most personal, like these thoughts that you think are only yours, or these emotions you have that you think are only yours, are probably not only yours. They're probably shared, but nobody is saying them because they feel it's too personal or maybe too revealing. And his saying was, that which is most personal, these things you're reluctant to share, are most global. The more personal it is, the more likely it is to be shared by somebody else in the group. And you may have, I don't know if Lauren is this type of person. When she's in a group, she might deny it when I say this, but when she's in a group, she will be the one that will say the thing that everybody's thinking but nobody's saying. And when she says it, they go, oh yeah, me too, but I didn't want to say that. And it was often, it's so paradoxical that the thing that most needs to be said is often the thing that isn't said. So the subtitle of her book, I Thought It Was Just Me, is 2 words: it isn't. So I've got 2 very short videos to show you. One is Brene Brown and the other is Tara Brach. One's 5 minutes and one's 3 minutes.
One of the things that I love in, I think it's the first book, The Gifts of Imperfection, you talk about being a wholehearted person. Now, my definition of spirituality is living an open-hearted life. So open-hearted, wholehearted. What does it mean to be a wholehearted person? You have actually, you know, a list of 10 different qualities that wholehearted people have in common. And so cultivating authenticity, letting go of what people think. That's the first one. Let's talk about that.
It's so hard. I thought doing this research, I thought going into it, there were authentic people and inauthentic people. Mm-hmm. I did not find any evidence of that at all. What I found is authenticity is a practice, and you choose it every day, sometimes every hour of every day. And it's a practice. It's not, I just wake up and, hey, I'm authentic. It's that when you walk into a meeting, you have to make the choice. Am I gonna show up and let myself be seen? Am I gonna raise my hand and say, wow, y'all look super excited. I don't know what in the hell you're talking about. I'm so lost. You know, that's a choice.
Yes,
Right? Mm-hmm. And make that authentic choice, you gotta let go of
the fakeroo, I say.
Yeah.
I call it the fakeroo. But you know what? I have found, I mean, I consider myself to be an authentic person, but when I am inauthentic is when I've allowed myself to be around people who were not, and then I have to fake it to be with them.
Oh, for sure, it's contagious.
Yes. So they're faking it,
yeah.
and you know you're in that situation when you do that, that kind of, you're laughing at jokes that aren't funny, you're pretending to be comfortable when you're not, and lose your own authenticity.
Yeah, and I do it.
So letting go of what people think. Okay, cultivating self-compassion, letting go of perfectionism, because there is no such thing.
No, and this was, you know, first of all, you know that this is what led, these 10 guideposts that emerged from the research is what led to the breakdown.
Yes.
Like, this did not make me happy.
because you were like 2 out of the 10.
I was 2 out of the 10, and I was cheating.
And you're writing the book.
Right. And so I had to put the data away. I didn't write the book until I was in therapy for a year and a half.
Wow.
And I went to a therapist with an Excel spreadsheet that said, here are the things that I need more of. I've got 6 weeks. Go.
Fix me.
Fix me.
Fix
she
me.
said, yeah. But no, so here's what I learned about
Oh, I love that you went to a therapist that sees therapists.
Yeah.
And that you started out by saying, look, I just want to be fixed. And I don't want to talk about that mother stuff and all that.
No,
the
no
past.
childhood BS.
No childhood BS. Let's just get to it.
Tips and techniques, baby. Bullet points. Bullet point me. Save me.
Tell me what to do.
Yeah, no.
Wow. Wow.
So perfectionism, what emerged for me in the data was that perfectionism is not about striving for excellence or healthy striving, which
Yeah.
I'm for.
Yeah.
It's a cognitive behavioral process, a way of thinking and feeling that says this: if I look perfect, do it perfect, work perfect, and live perfect, I can avoid or minimize shame, blame, and judgment.
You know what I thought when I was reading this? I had another aha. Aha.
2 people.
This was my other aha. That perfectionism, I never gotten this before until I read this, that perfectionism is the ultimate fear. That the people who are walking around as perfectionists, who have to have everything so, that they are ultimately afraid that the world is going to see them for who they really are and they won't measure up.
There's no question. That's what it
That's
is for
correct,
me.
right?
That's exactly
Okay.
what it is.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fear. And
Because it's very different than trying to be excellent and
No,
working
yeah.
hard and doing your best. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I call perfectionism the 20-ton shield. We carry it around thinking it's going to protect us from being hurt.
Yeah.
But it protects us from being seen.
Yeah, it's interesting because I know people who are, and I actually think, kind of sad because you're striving for a world that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And I can see right through it.
God, it's so slippery. I'm like a recovering perfectionist. To
Really?
me, it's like one day at a time. Yeah, because like if I'm feeling
How did it show up for you?
academically in my work, like if we've missed church for a couple of Sundays, my kids are going in starched outfits on that Sunday, the next Sunday, like, just be beyond judgment, which there's no such thing.
Yep.
Share with you a story that I heard from Pema Chodron that I really liked a lot. And she describes this 15-year-old Hispanic guy from Los Angeles, and he had grown up in a violent neighborhood. And he had an attitude. He was the kind of guy that, he pushed people around and kind of like had a chip on his shoulder. And he was just rough. He had this like I'm the baddest guy in town kind of attitude. So he was sent to Boulder, Colorado for the summer to give him a break, hopefully have a nice time in the Rocky Mountains where these folks that were involved with Shambhala and Chogyam Trungpa, the Tibetan teacher, gathered. And that's how she got to know him. So here's what she says. She says, one day he came to an event where Trungpa was, at the end of the event, he sang the Shambhala anthem. Now this was an awful experience for the rest of us because for some reason he loved to sing the Shambhala anthem in a high-pitched, squeaky, and cracked voice. This particular event was outside. As Rinpoche sang into the microphone, the sound traveled for miles across the plains, and this young boy, his name is Juan, broke down and started to cry. Okay, this is the moment. Everyone else was feeling awkward or embarrassed, but Juan just started to cry. Later he said he cried because he had never seen anyone that brave. He said, that guy, he's not afraid to be a fool. So that turned out to be the turning point, because he realized he didn't have to be afraid to be a fool either. In other words, all that persona and that chip on his shoulder that was kind of covering over his soft spot, he could let them go. And this guy was sharp and bright, and he got the message, and he got his education. Now he's back in LA helping other kids. So I find that story really powerful. Because deep down we are afraid of embarrassing ourselves, of not looking good. and the degree of freedom that's possible when we stop using our energy to appear a certain way and just let our naturalness be there, and the possibility of really discovering true peace and okayness and belonging when we're ourselves is such a beautiful invitation. That guy is not afraid of making a fool of himself. That is bravery. So what we do is we start to get to know the vulnerability, and we're really trying to sense if you can be fully inside the most vulnerable part of you. We're really asking, well, what's life like from the experience, from this experience in here? What's the beliefs and feelings of that vulnerable place? The beliefs are usually something in the lines of, I'm unsafe, I'm going to be rejected, I'm not going to be loved. It's not okay. And the feelings could be shame, fear, squeeze, sometimes grief, like there's already a loss and there's a grieving of it. Now, the more wounding there's been, the more the defenses, but no matter what level, the key in beginning to loosen the identification with the scales is attend and befriend, is bringing a gentle, curious, forgiving attention.
So go into a meditation. Just make yourself comfortable. I've got, for those who like to lay down, I've got a couple of yoga mats back there if the rug's not quite enough. Just kind of checking in, you don't need to change into any sort of extreme posture, just noticing how it is to be sitting there. Noticing how the chair or the floor is supporting you. The actual sensations of support, of pressure, of contact, maybe of warmth. And checking in physically, noticing how your arms are resting in your lap or on your legs, on the floor. And as you're sensing, noticing it's a two-way street. It's not just you receiving input from your body, it's also you reaching out to your body, paying attention to it in a way we normally don't do. And with a gentle hand saying, I know you're there and appreciate the support that you give me. And when you're ready, letting your awareness come to breath. Wherever it is that's most vivid for you, it could be your belly with the movement of your tummy as you breathe in and out, or your chest as it expands slightly with each in-breath, or the movement of air through your nostrils. There's no wrong place to feel the breath, just wherever you can sense it physically, so you can observe the breath without seeing if it's possible just to notice how it's moving without having to control it. Because you're breathing just fine. Nothing you have to do to make your breathing better than it already is. And if your mind wanders into analysis of what we're doing, or thought about something that happened, or something that's about to happen, or something in your life, that's also part of the meditation, is recognizing that, acknowledging it, and coming back to sensations of breathing, since that's our object of attention right now. and doing that trip back with gentleness and kindness. So everybody's mind wanders from time to time. Most of us have our mind wander quite a lot. That's perfectly fine. And at the same time, you can come back to sensations of breath. And as you sit there, you might recall maybe a time when in your life, a specific time when you were with a group of people or another person, and there was something you felt an impulse to share, but it was personal, and you were afraid that if you shared it, you might be rejected, or somebody would have some critical judgment about it. But when you did, the opposite happened. You discover that people were closer to you rather than more distant to you after that. Or you might have seen that happen with someone else, someone who was brave enough to share what was going on with them and how you felt closer to them after they said that. And not only did you not feel judgmental towards them, you felt closer to them. Or you might recall a time when you were with another person or a group, and you had the sense that what you were thinking right then, something that was kind of prodding you to share it, but you're afraid that you're maybe the only one that had that thought or that way of thinking about it or that perspective. And for whatever reason, you did share it. And when you did, you were surprised that it wasn't just okay, but other people had been thinking the same thing but weren't sharing it. And that shifted something in the meeting because that was now part of the group experience, that this was something that a number of people were thinking. Or you might have seen that in someone else, that someone was willing to share something and that was just what you were thinking too, but hadn't shared it. The next 8 or 9 minutes will be in silence, and you can continue on with this theme in your own meditation, or you can have it be a breath meditation, or however it is you'd like to use the time that you have with yourself. We'll end the meditation with the sound of the bell.